the How Could You podcast. I'm Lauren Tocci.
And I'm Ryan Tocci. We're here today to find out what kind of host invites you to his house for the weekend and dies on you.
I can't wait to talk about this batshit crazy movie. It shouldn't have been made, and I'm so excited to talk about that.
I totally agree with you.
Well, welcome everyone. If this is your first time joining our podcast, thank you so much for checking us out. We are two people who fell in love in a movie theater and never quite left. We started this podcast because as giant film nerds, we realized there were some huge gaps in our film knowledge. It started with me having never seen The Goonies until I was an adult. It continued with films like Godfather and other sundry films throughout, American cinema history. And we've landed on this film we're going to be talking about today.
Just the classic like the rest of them.
And not that we like to theme everything, but hey, we're going into Labor Day. Summer is ending. So in so many ways, this feels perfect. But Ryan, before the summer ends, do you have any films that you want to recommend as like our Tossi's takes this week? Like, this is a movie you should watch before the summer is over.
So just a good summer movie you're looking for?
Yeah. I'm not even talking anything current. Just something that's solid and reminds you of summer.
I mean, I'm always going to throw out American Graffiti.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I think at this point, it's just a prerequisite that I say that at least once on the show. But the two I think jumped in my mind, and hopefully I don't steal either from you, are Vast of Night, which is a completely, underrated, underappreciated film out there on Amazon that we've talked about in the past. It just screams summer to me. And it's a very old, typey sci-fi, we've talked about it before, but highly recommend it. Slow burn, but definitely feels like summer. The other I would say is Super 8.
Great pick, yeah.
Super 8 gives me complete summer vibes. So, yeah, American Graffiti and two sci-fi films. That's what I'm throwing at you here.
Well, and the funny thing about Super 8 is I feel like I have like such summer memories associated with that. The first time we saw it in the theater, of course, was in the summer. Yeah. We've watched it at the drive-in. We've also watched it with friends outside at their house.
Yeah.
Like in their lawn, they set up a screen. Like
it was like a secret cinema that night too, because we didn't know what was going to be played.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's right. That was so fun. I think those are great recommendations. American Graffiti just screams summer. And the soundtrack. I think it's because we always listen to the soundtrack if we're driving to the beach. So I think like it gets crystallized in that way too for us. So I 100% was going to say The Vast of Night.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is about this film that I feel just mad that more people don't talk about it. I know we've had really great conversations with friends who have seen it. It's this sleepy, dusty Texas town. It's not set in the summer, but it's got a real summer feel to it. It's set during basketball season. But
my gosh. You're completely right.
Can I tell you? I completely think of this as a summer movie, and I don't know why. Yeah. Because it's not set at that time.
I feel foolish.
No, nothing
Can
to feel...
I rewind now and go, be kind, rewind? I have a different pick.
Absolutely not. We're not going by blockbuster rules. This is your pick. Unless you do have an additional pick, I will allow it.
I do, but I feel like I've stepped on you, so I don't want to do that. I want you to finish out.
Okay.
And then I do have another one that I think a lot of the crowd out there will agree with us on.
So one of my picks, other than The Vast of Night, which is not a summer movie, was going to be The Parent Trap. Either one you want to watch.
Yeah, I gotcha.
Either you want to watch the original or watch the remake with both Lindsay Lohans. There's something about that movie that screams summer. I mean, it starts at a summer camp, so I think in that way, and it's all about like those kind of last moments of summer. I rewatched it the other day because I was just in the mood for something like comfy and nostalgic, and it just still makes me smile. Even though like the conceit of the film is like deeply messed up. Like, oh God, you've never seen The Parent Trap. I can see it all over your face.
I have.
Oh, okay, you have seen it. Okay. Yeah. I got worried for a second. Because like, I mean, the whole thing is like...
The whole episode just changes. You just make me have to do that one.
Haha, we're not doing Weekend at Bernie's. We're doing this. But I just, like the whole thing that the parents do is like so strange, but I don't know. It's so quirky and fun and I love it. My other recommendation, maybe because we just watched it, but also because now it just deeply reminds me of summer, is I would recommend The Great Outdoors.
That was the other one I was just about to say.
Yeah. Same brain.
Of course. I mean, but yeah, go ahead. I mean, I agree with you.
Well, I mean, it's just great. I mean, it's John Candy and Dan Aykroyd in this, just like, because he's like so like awful and annoying and like wow. And he's so, you just want to like hurt him most of the movie, but he's also just so great. Like the whole, I deeply want our Halloween costumes this year to be you and I when they go in to have to trap the bat. Because I think those would be the funniest costumes ever.
Those would be really good.
No one will get it, but I would just be so happy to wear. Like, we had our friends texted us the other night about they were having the old 96er.
Yeah, oh yeah, yes.
And I just feel like it's a perfect, like, if you're hanging on to those last few days of summer. And I also want to vacate.
Do you think they finished the gristle and fat on?
I really have a hard time watching it. I realize I don't do well with, like, overeating sequences. We talked about this when we did Nostalgia Cinema with the blueberry pie sequence in Stand By Me. Like, I kind of can't take it.
You don't let me watch the Nathan's hot dog eating contest on July 4th ever.
Lips and assholes, Tassie. And oh gosh, if you've never watched The Great Outdoors, please understand. Right. That's a quote from the film. So that was your extra, was The Great Outdoors?
That was my extra one. But I think there's probably a ton of people listening right now screaming 5,000 of them, especially the fact that we've built this whole idea on lies since we both picked a movie that wasn't even based around summer.
And then that is a genuine reaction. You said it's like summertime. I'm like, it's not. It's definitely basketball. I don't know. Maybe Texas basketball season in the 50s was at a different time of the year. Who knows?
But let's move forward, let's end this segment like summer is ending so we don't, talk for another half hour before we actually get to the movie like we did in our last episode.
Sorry, everybody.
We heard you, audience. But let's move we're going into Labor Day, so let's talk about the greatest Labor Day film of all time.
Isn't it the only Labor Day movie?
Like, you know what? Don't take this away from it, okay?
Sure.
If Die Hard gets Christmas, if Jaws gets 4th of July, Weekend at Bernie's gets Labor Day, okay?
An even distribution for sure.
We should. I'm here today to make sure that this becomes this iconic Labor Day film.
Good. Gather with your families and watch Weekend at Bernie's.
Yes. But before we get it, let's talk about 1989. That's when this film comes out. And, it's a good year. It's a solid year of film. So much so that this is our 4th film in our short period of time of doing the How Could You podcast of doing a 1989 movie.
Wait, is that real?
Yes.
What were the other 3?
Like 10% of our films have been from 1989.
We always talk 99. Maybe it's 89.
It could have been. But we had National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation.
Amazing.
Field of Dreams.
Awesome.
We had The Burbs.
Iconic.
And then, we're going to have this one today. So, but this is also to talk about the fact that we've skipped all of these other films. Batman.
That's immediately, you said 89 and I went, Batman. Why have we not talked about Batman?
Batman was literally the biggest thing in the world. That year.
You own it on Laserdisc.
I do.
Signed by Tim Burton.
Proudly. Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Look Who's Talking, which, all right, those were a thing.
Okay, so here's the thing. They're not as bad as you think.
Maybe not.
Yeah.
We're not here to debate that. How could you today? Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, which also could be a really good summer film. I'm curious. That film, I don't know if it still has the life that it did. That was huge back then.
It 100% should. I love that movie. It's sweet. It's a perfect, oh my gosh, we have to do that for Nostalgia Cinema. That is such a great movie.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
I'm sure Disney's always easy at giving rights to those types of films.
Maybe they're not as expensive for the Rick Moranis movies.
But then, you got Ghostbusters 2, Back to the Future 2, Dead Poets Society.
Oof.
When Harry Met Sally.
Amazing.
So, little Tossius tease that we might be getting a 5th.
Oh yeah, we will be getting a 5th 1989.
But it's just a Major League. Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
Yo, what was with this year?
Right? Lean on Me.
All right, that's it. It's a 1989.
Roadhouse.
You can't see, but I just kicked under the table and you said Roadhouse.
Which is getting a remake, just for the record, everybody.
Yay.
Jake Gyllenhaal and Conor McGregor gonna be coming to your screens real soon.
Can't wait.
But alas, despite all of those films, again, we're here to talk about this movie. And why wouldn't we be, right? Let's pitch it here. Let's steal little John Mulaney, a little pitch meeting here, and go. Somebody walked into a studio and was like, all right, I got a movie, all right? These two guys, low-level exec, at a big major company, discover a $2 million error, right? They uncover a plot to embezzle from the company. They tell it to the one man who they shouldn't. That man then goes to his mob boss to have these two men killed at his home. In a strange turn of events, that man is then murdered. The two come back, and they decide to pretend that this man is still alive. And all of this is a comedy. Think Odd Couple meets Night of the Living Dead. With that pitch, I ask you, Lauren Tocci, how could you not have seen Weekend at Bernie's?
Did you just listen to your description of the movie? It's psycho shit.
The better question might be, how could you have made this movie? How could this movie have gotten past and getting made?
You know, it's honestly, I just have to credit, and it's apropos with Goodfellas, like cocaine and like reckless corporate abandonment, like as to how this movie gets made. It's honestly kind of ridiculous. And sorry, so I'll defend this. I'm going to be very honest. And this makes me sound like an emo kid, but like comedies haven't always been my jam. And I have a lot of like weird blind spots with 80s comedies in particular. That makes me sound really like morbid, that I'm like, oh, I don't like to laugh. It's not that I don't like, it's just like, it's not, there were a lot of that I haven't revisited. And here's the thing, I think I may have seen parts of this, but my perception of what this movie was versus the reality of us watching it this summer were two very different things. Like, I didn't want to see it. I'm like, so it's like a corpse, like, dancing about, and this sounds...
Oh, no. Let's not get to part 2 yet. Bernie wasn't dancing about in this one, okay?
But honestly, like, I thought it sounded kind of sick. Like, and again, like, I love horror films, but this seemed odd to me, and I thought it was going to be super gross out. Like, I think probably what we all understand to be... Oh, what's the film with the guy who's, like...
Swiss Army Man?
Thank you, Swiss Army Man. Like, I think I thought this movie was like Swiss Army Man, like, before I knew what Swiss Army Man was. So I just had this perception of, like, this movie's gonna be gross. He's gonna get, like, all decayed. Bernie holds up beautifully. Again, I think his cocaine was cut with formaldehyde. It's the only thing that makes sense to me. But it is a weird thing to think about how this movie got made and got greenlit. And again, like, 80s movies are just, you know, there's that, you referenced it already, that great John Mulaney sketch talking about how Back to the Future gets pitched. And, like, it's such a great commentary on how weird and also, like, how creative some of the concepts were for these films. Like, we certainly now, I mean, you will hear a lot of, like, especially on film Twitter, people talking about no longer original content. And I want to be like, yeah, Weekend at Bernie's might be the reason for this, guys. Because when they were just greenlighting everything because Hollywood essentially, like, had a printing press of money, like, this is the type of stuff they made.
Dude, the 80s made some really weird comedies.
Yeah, and like things that you just accept as like, no, that's lighthearted.
Like, we were just talking about one the other day. I'm not going to talk about it here because I'm trying to pitch it for us to do next half of the season. But, like, yeah, just some really strange. And this is up there. I completely agree with you.
Well, and honestly, when we sat down and watched it, and I will say this, if you're like a diehard Weekend at Bernie's fan out there, like, I'm not coming for your movie. I really enjoyed myself, and hopefully I, like, portray that. But you've got to admit how ridiculous the concept is. And my only real reference of it was kind of thinking it's about, like, two, like, bro corporate dudes walking around a corpse for a weekend. And additionally, for some reason, I thought it was their dad.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that would put a whole different spin on it.
Like, right?
A little less fun.
And the only other thing I knew about it is it's in the trivia episode of Friends when they're like, what does Rachel say her favorite movie is? And they're like, Dangerous Liaisons. What is her actual favorite movie? Weekend at Bernie's. Like, that is my whole frame of reference going into this film.
This movie... this movie should have fell into the abyss.
Yes.
It should not have worked. We shouldn't be sitting here talking about it. Now, there's certainly debate, and I'm sure we'll get to that, on whether we need to be doing a whole entire episode about it. I feel like we might be one of the forefront of podcasters talking about Weekend at Bernie's, and I feel proud about that.
I don't know if we should, like, stake our flag on that we're blazing this territory.
I like Goodfellas, to Weekend at Bernie's.
It's a really weird transition.
It's a palate cleanser, okay, people?
But like so much like interconnection. Like,
and still so much cocaine.
So much cocaine, so much mob, so many corpses.
Right.
Just less. But that's the thing is like.
Good question. Would Vito have been part of the the family and Goodfellas, or?
Amazing. No, he's like the Fredo. Because he's like not good at it anymore.
Oh no, you're talking about Paulie.
Oh wait, that's right, that's Paulie.
All right, well let's not get too far ahead of ourselves.
But so in doing this, so like the first time, so we watched this not for the podcast. We watched it it was the beginning of the summer. We were looking for summer movies.
It's a great summer movie.
It is a great summer movie. And you were like, let's watch Weekend at Bernie's. And I was like, okay. I think I literally at the end rolled off the couch and went, yeah, we need to do this for the podcast.
I was worried. I was worried you were going to just hate it. And I can't say I would have blamed you necessarily.
No, but like I loved it because it was so much different than what I thought it was going to be. But I do have to remark so we were doing research for this and there's not like a wealth of production history behind this. I think probably one of the more notable things is that John Cryer wanted to be in the film. This was originally supposed to be a vehicle for the Coreys. So obviously the characters at the center of this, of Larry and Richard, were going to be much younger. I have to think that the setup was probably different. It was probably, my guess would be like kids vacationing next door or something of the like if they had been involved, because they would have been teenagers when this was being made.
Yeah. I mean, but I totally see them in doing this.
Oh, it would have been hilarious.
Yeah.
And so great.
That actually would have been pretty good.
It's a great what if for this movie because you think about a lot of the humor I think would still play similarly, maybe a little less necrophilia, but like for the most part, I have to think that like a lot of the setups would be pretty similar. I could see the mob thing still being very much a part of it, but like more like they have like kind of like same hapless idea of like they have no idea. So you maybe wouldn't have the same setup, but I think you would have the same outcomes, if that makes any sense. And I could still see those scenes playing really nicely. I'm just thinking of like Corey, like Feldman, like puppeting Bernie, and that just looks hilarious in my mind.
I almost find like who would play like the straight guy man, and then who would be playing the like wacky crazy one? Do you think?
My gosh, that's easy. So Corey Haim would be playing the Richard part, and then Corey Feldman would be Larry, right?
Yeah, you're probably right.
Yeah. It's 100%.
I'm so glad that didn't come to fruition though, because we get Dream Little Dream, and I am just going to keep going to bat that is a fantastic film.
I know you keep trying to get it on the podcast.
But there's also a Dream a Little Dream 2, which is terrible, and I think has tones of Weekend at Bernie's with them being at the beach and things like that. Yeah.
So in some imagined reality, this did still happen. But I find interesting that this movie is actually based on a novella. So there was a basis for this. So as much as we were joking around about like kind of the drug-induced pitch meeting that leads to this movie getting made, it was actually kind of based on something, but when I say based, I mean the loosest of bases. So there was a Brazilian novella called The Two Deaths of Quincas Watchfell. It was written by Jorge Amado. I've not read this, although I kind of want to, because it actually sounds really good.
Oh, okay.
But so essentially the story of this is the Bernie character, if you will, has passed away right at the beginning of the book. And his family remembers him as a drunkard, a womanizer, kind of shady with money, that he left his family pretty abruptly for like a side piece, like not a good dude.
Sounding a lot like Bernie Lomax.
Exactly. And so that's like kind of the mistake. Like, and I think you're supposed to think that his shady money, if I remember from the description accurately, like the shady money dealings, like I think he was somewhat of means, but they kind of remember him more like a penniless drunk, like he squandered anything he had by the end of his life. So there is a funeral, but like the family doesn't really attend it. They're not really interested in mourning him. But on the converse of this is the story of his friends mourning him. And his friends remember him as like a bon vivant, man about town, lot of fun, best guy at the bar, like can get any woman he pleases. And so in that light, because the family doesn't properly mourn him, they hold a second funeral. but they realize that he wouldn't want a funeral, so they prop the corpse up at the bar and they dance around with him and decorate him. And then I think not like a Viking burial, set him on fire, but I think they like set him out to sea.
All right.
So the two deaths.
Got it. I don't want to be remembered like him, but I'm all for that. How I'm going out. Like, can you do that for me?
You want me to like dress you up and like
Yeah,
move
why
you
not?
around?
Why not?
Do you get costume changes?
Put on, some Ray-Bans. I'm good for this. I don't know if we need costume changes.
So just Ray-Bans and like a Ghostbuster shirt.
Yeah.
And we just move you around the space. I mean,
That is
okay.
okay. I see. So that's really funny that this film actually gets, it's taken from, that piece of work.
Well, and I also find, first off, I can completely see this as a novella because I think it would be probably like very rich in the way in which we discuss like death and mourning and what does it like mean to actually celebrate life. I think it could be a really interesting novella. It is twisted to me that that's what this comes from, at least in some part, that the idea of like, okay, like we just kind of want to, I don't know, again, like I'm just thinking about a person being like taxidermied and like, at their celebration of life, like sitting up in a chair and then like, I don't know, like doing like the Cupid shuffle. Like I'm picturing this in my mind. And then, but this is obviously, I willfully forget many times during this movie that he's a corpse.
Yeah.
It's the smirking. It's the smirking, Tassi. I tell you, the smirking.
Well, yes. I mean, you have to give Terry Kaiser all the credit in the world. Because he just, I mean...
He doesn't have to do anything, and yet has to do everything.
We're not going to do an Oscar portion of this, but there needs to be a small little Oscar made for Terry Kaiser and how he pulls this role off.
But like an Oscar that like has like a wind jacket and like aviator shades. If anyone wants to make that for us, I will proudly display that in our home.
But no, the smirk is supposed to be, I guess, that was a decision by Terry Kaiser. It was supposed to be essentially like he was always kind of like he was messing with these guys. Like, so like that's why he ends up putting this like kind of permanent smirk on his face, which is supposed to be kind of at the two of them. Like he still somehow has this weird upper hand over them, even though, he's deceased.
Can I tell you? I like Bernie. I know I'm not supposed
Wait,
to.
hold on.
But I like him.
You like Mr. Lomax pre-death or post-death? And yes, folks, this is your family-friendly podcast you came to listen to, where we've talked about taxidermy and people and
a lot of cocaine.
Yes.
But so, okay, but both.
All right.
Okay, here's the thing.
Let's let you make a case for Mr. Lomax.
Okay. No, you know what? Let's get into the film. And when he appears in gold-watched glory, I will make my case for why I like Bernie Lomax.
It was a real Rolex. So then let's just start right at the opening credits. I think I love these opening credits. I think they put us in the space we need to be. As goofy as that sounds.
No. I think you're right. Because, like, again, like, and you do need something kind of vibrant, and without any sense of, like, the dark tone of the fact that we're going to watch a corpse, like, dance around the Hamptons for an entire weekend. But, and credit to director Ted Kotcheff, because, like, I do think there is so much of this, again, like, tonally, that could have really messed with this. Like, in the hands of a Tim Burton, let's just say. If we can imagine that reality given 89, like, this may be funny, but, like, funny, like, to the kids
I'm Bernie.
Yeah. I don't even know if I can applaud you for doing that. Summer should be fun. Bernie, not fun. That's to all my Summer House fans if they can get that reference. But I do think there is like a really nice relatability. Like summer in the city is like one of the most oppressive feelings. Like there's like a magic time those first few days of summer where it's like really cute to be in New York City and then it just gets gross. And to me, there's nothing like the heat leading into like a Labor Day weekend because you're just so sick of it at that point.
I always think of the quote from Spike Lee. He talks about when they did Summer of Sam, and he talked about how, that was during the heat wave and everything, and when all that happened, and he just talks about New York and how everybody loses their damn mind when it gets that hot. Like, because
Yeah.
it's just the heat is just different in New York City.
No, so, because there's no cross breeze. Like there's
Yeah.
nothing that's like helping to alleviate some of that. Getting to beaches is complicated, and if even if you're like, well, like there's a waterfront all around New York. Okay, try and catch that wind off the Hudson. All right, like it's not. It's such an oppressive. And even if you think about like Summer of Sam, of course, with like the blackouts, that makes it like 10,000 times worse. But I love how ridiculous it is in the beginning and exaggerated, but also how exaggerated is this? Because it's so disgusting in a city when it's
Well,
that hot.
yeah, I mean, so we get introduced to our two main leads, right? It's Andrew McCarthy as Larry.
Amazing.
An 80s staple
Yes.
with McCarthy. And my understanding is, like you talked about, it was supposed to be Jonathan Silverman, who played Richard, and it was supposed to be John Cryer. But Andrew McCarthy was really interested, so they were going to bring Andrew McCarthy in to play Richard.
Oh.
But then he really wanted to play Larry. So and it seems like from everything I was hearing and reading about the production, Andrew McCarthy had some clout at that time, at least on this production, with the director and everything. So they moved him over into the Larry portion. Jonathan Silverman got to stay on as Richard, and it sounds like poor John Cryer kind of got pushed out on that one. But we get these two. Again, we talked about it before. It's the odd couple, right? Like Jonathan Silverman was Richard playing the straight man, and then you got Andrew McCarthy, playing the wild card.
Can we just call them what they are?
Yeah.
Prototypes for Ross and Chandler?
A little bit, yeah.
Not a little. It's like 100%.
I don't know if Chandler's ever that wacky.
Chandler seasons 1 and 2, man. Chandler's pretty wacky. Now the only thing I'll say is obviously Richard is a lot more likable than Ross.
Jonathan Silverman had a cameo on Friends, but then again, who hasn't? So
at that point, if you lived within like spitting distance, I think of that studio and were an actor of note in like the 90s, you were probably going to be on Friends.
But I think the two, I'm just going to say it right up front. I mean, because we'll talk about this throughout, but these two weirdly have great chemistry.
Oh, it's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't think so. This is the thing, like, I realized immediately about Larry is that, like, he is 100% that friend that is going to get you killed one day, but he's also the friend you have the most fun with. And I realized, like, there's so much, like, in the beginning that can make him kind of unlikable. Like, he's clearly not really holding up his end of the work. He's definitely grubbing for credit and favor with, like, Bernie when they finally get, or, in that great moment, he's like, burn! And he's like, it's Bernie. And Richard should be, like, somewhat unlikable, but I think it's their chemistry that kind of saves that, because it allows the kind of wackiness of his comedic styling in that role to really shine and not become annoying or feeling like it's bogging down with the movie with like joke. Yeah. It's like because they play off of each other so nicely, like the chemistry is everything in this movie.
They good, and Richard still is very funny. I mean, Jonathan Silverman's still very funny in it. I have to say and fully admit, and I don't think it's going to be shocking, I thought Larry was the coolest when I was a kid. Like, I thought...
I don't find this shocking at all. Ryan on vacation is like Larry all the time. Like, this is 100%.
I'm pretty sure I'm going to run out and get myself a pair of purple Chucks.
I literally thought that we were watching the movie and I was like, how does Ryan not have a purple pair? Because he has literally every other color under the sun of Chucks.
And I'm pretty sure I dress like Larry for work.
I also, like, this is one of my favorite, like, Larry vibe moments, and it happens, like, so early in the film, is when they're getting mugged, and he goes, get your ass out of here, it's too hot. And I'm like, yes, Larry, exactly. It's that kind of gross in the city. But it's just so, like, dismissive of, like, I don't care you have a weapon.
The mugger's just like, what? All right.
Because is Larry wrong? Absolutely not.
I think, so we get them, they're working on a Sunday. So we know exactly who, and I love you get them coming into the building, and then they decide to go upstairs to the beach, quote unquote.
Yeah. Well, you also get that great, like, dunk on Jones Beach.
Oh my God.
Which, because, and so if you don't know this is actually because, so it's referencing something. So it was the syringe tide in 87 and 88 that, took over Jones Beach because of, a medical waste dump, and there was just, syringes all over Jones Beach. Also, it was, my family's beach, and, so shout out to Jones Beach. And it's super beautiful now. Don't sleep on Jones Beach.
They go at Jones Beach and Coney Island hard in this.
But we've been to Coney Island. I love Coney Island. It's, very charming, but Coney, I love when they talk, what do they say, that you'll disintegrate for watch the fish disintegrate?
And then you just have that scene of them with the tar just getting everywhere.
And then I love, that he has, the little kiddie pool. Yeah. And I'm like, look, if you gotta work on a Sunday, give yourself some amenities.
But see, this is what I mean, you talk about a film like this, and it's talking about directing choices, I think this whole beginning is great because what I think it does is it gives you this New York that's cramped and uncomfortable and hot, and just the hustle of it and everything, which leads you then once you get over to the Hampton Island, it's free, it's the beach, it's such a great juxtaposition. So I think this whole setup in the city is perfect.
Well, because the Hamptons just has that air of that cool breeze, that that elitist kind of dream life that you could work really hard in the city and then your weekends are in the Hamptons. # more life. All right, that's my last Summer House reference for the. No, it won't be my last Summer House.
Get
reference.
Get your own Bravo podcast.
Okay, Danielle, if you're listening.
I think we have a lot of Bravo fans out there that are yelling at me.
So I do think there is I think the juxtaposition of the two is so important. Now, obviously, so if you didn't know this, this was actually shot in North Carolina, mainly because of the cost of filming in the Hamptons. I mean, certainly, you're talking about the rich's playground. You're talking about some of the most elite real estate, not just on the East Coast, but in the country. So filming there was
they had a really hard time finding somebody that would give up their house too. So that it was.
Who's giving up their house in the summer in the Hamptons?
Right.
I'd get activated from that. Okay, that's my last Summer House reference for the episode for real. But I think there's I think that juxtaposition of how hard life is in the city. There's that great joke about Richard's apartment because they talk about parking things in the city, and he said, or because they're looking at Bernie's car,
right?
And he says about do you know how much it is to park a car in this city? It costs more than my rent. And then Richard says to him, well, it's fair. His car is bigger than your apartment. And there's just all those great things of the juxtaposition of two guys who are obviously trying to work their way up the corporate ladder and kind of seeing that aspirational, could we be like Bernie Lomax one day and have that kind of wealth that comes with, and also freedom that comes with having worked your way up this ladder. You get the sense that they're both kind of hapless. I don't think that's necessarily where they'll end up, but you can understand kind of the frustration that comes from we're grinding all weekend, but look at this guy, look at the women he gets. It's kind of ridiculous. Which I think is then kind of the great juxtaposition when you finally get to see them around Bernie, because you just see the difference in how they carry themselves. They're so much more tense and frantic when they're around him versus Bernie, who's just well,
you got Richard that feels nervous, and then Larry who's just trying to impress.
It's so groping and it's not sniveling, he's not sucking up to him in that way. But I do have to, can we just have a moment though for every secretary in a corporate structure in the 80s?
Right?
Can we just pour one out for them? Because when she has to shoo them away, I'm like, man, how much have you had to do this? How many weird comments have you heard? Right. How many mirrors have you had to clean? It's got to be such a hardship to be in that structure in the 80s.
So with that, that's a good time for me to ask. This is our introduction into Bernie Lomax. You had said earlier, you're a fan.
I'm a fan.
So let's talk about Bernie in this moment, right? I don't think it was any mystery to any audience members in the 80s. I'm sure that I didn't watch the trailer. I don't remember what the trailer was, but I'm pretty sure you knew Bernie was not a good person at this point. But Bernie, they come to Bernie, who sneaks off to the bathroom, immediately just dismisses them in mid-conversation and sneaks off to the bathroom we have to assume it's the 80s again.
He's literally like rubbing his nose, his gums, his nasal passages. It's like so obvious.
For the record, I just want to say I laughed a lot about Terry Kaiser talking about how he got this role, because he was like, he said essentially he thinks the whole reason he got the role was because he had a great mustache. And he's like, and I only had the mustache because I had been in a motorcycle accident, so I was still in recovery and I hadn't shaved.
You know what? I don't want to say that accidents are ever happy, but what a happy accident to have such a power stash.
It's a solid stash.
That is an icon of a stash. That stash, I think, helps him to not decompose. There's magic in that stash.
But, so then we find out that he tries to, gaslight Larry and Richard here, right? Like, they bring this, what they found. They discover the $2 million life insurance policy. They bring it to him, and he first tries to play along and then just tries to dismiss it completely on them. Now we know it's because Bernie has the $2 million, but, and poor Larry, man, he just throws Richard under the bus immediately.
Oh my God.
Richard worked on that.
It's vicious. Well, because it's more than 2 million, right? Because it's supposed to be like multiple payouts. Is that correct? Or is it add up to 2 million?
I was a little confused. It was 4 payouts. And essentially I think 2 of them they said, right? Like, we're not supposed to, or after after whoever it was passed away.
Well, and that's like the great thing, because like they've clearly found something, and he's like, no, it's not this.
And that old paper from the printer paper.
No, this movie is all right. Here's my defense of Bernie Lomax. What a time capsule in human form. Like, it's the suit, the cut of the suit, it's the stash, it's the hair, it's the gold Rolex. It's just never has 1980s CEO like vibed so hard. Like, he is literally, if you had a paper doll, it would be him.
Gordon Gekko, man, everybody's favorite icon.
But here's the thing. I'm going to say that Gordon Gekko has that air of Michael Douglas charm. No, CEOs in the 80s looked like Bernie Lomax. It's so great. Chef's kiss. Love it. I think it's why I kind of find him funny.
Do you like when he's smoking and then he tells Larry he's not allowed to smoke in there?
Yes, because it's just BDE all over that office. I love it. It's just, he is a man who is so ridiculously privileged. He has no idea how ridiculous in some way. Like, the whole conversation about the Maserati. We'll just paint it. See how easy it is to do business with me? I'm like, are you really painting a Maserati? Like, it's just... And please understand, if anyone's like, man, I didn't think that that's Lauren's vibe. No, it's not. I'm saying this facetiously. Obviously, the man is terrible, but I kind of enjoy how terrible he is.
And let's move forward to why he's so terrible.
Oh my gosh.
Because we get I still to this day will do the quote of, the man loves us. Absolutely loves us. Right into a great, change into, we need to kill them, Vito.
It is so great. First of all, you quoted that a lot before I ever saw this movie. So which now is just like kind of great to know what that was. But I think it's that juxtaposition of the comedy that works so well. Like, this is such a great edited moment. They're then in, again, like, I think like the inside of the 80s liver. Like, I mean, that's in that restaurant. And it's great because it's not just about like the kind of corporate sleaze aspect. You find out there's this like obvious, even larger layer of criminality that's occurring here with Bernie and the plot. I love that the mob is kind of unwilling. They're kind of like...
They became businessmen.
Yeah, they're like, we don't do that anymore.
Well, which is a funny thing because, right, isn't that what we know of the mob a little bit of the 80s, right? Where they started to change a little bit, because they had become so high profile, they had to almost go, legit. I mean, to some degree.
So, Ryan, I wasn't involved with the mob in the 80s, but you said that in a way that feels weirdly telling. Like, guys, we had to get legit later on.
Are we going back to talking about the Tocci family and
no,
being like Tommy?
You know what? But you're right. There is this, like, element of, like, it does kind of, like, historically line up in that way. And, like, there is this, like, quote unquote legitimacy that they're trying to have. But what's really funny is at that they're still like, okay, well, we like have to kill Bernie, right? Like he's
Right.
become a problem.
Well, I mean, what the hell was Bernie thinking, right? Like, Vito says it, he's gotten sloppy and greedy, and there's no way you can argue that. I mean, the man's trying to be with the girlfriend of the mob boss. I mean, come on.
Boiny, like when they're like up against the car, I'm like, chick, like, do you have no shame? Like he's literally right inside, and like you're dating someone in the mob. I don't care how legit he says, but it's like there's clearly like I think you're to understand that he, and maybe in this way is like kind of the Vito. Like there is a sense of this guy is out of control. He's gotten too much power, and it's becoming a problem. He's making us kind of like, I think vulnerable in a lot of ways because there's obviously this like huge fraud thing. But then it's like, this is like, and it's another game of juxtaposition because you have that great like transfer from the, the office space to being in the restaurant. And then very shortly after this, we get him out in the Hamptons, just kind of like living his best Bernie life, which feels like this other, and maybe this is why I find this character so fascinating, is because he operates in each of these spaces so differently. From the guy we see having his car valet parked with his date to the person in the office who's like, old Bernie owes you two a great deal. Sincerely. Like, it's like so earnest to, we have to kill him, to like, I'm like up against my car with this like girl who's like the mob boss's girlfriend, to like being kind of casual and like in the Hamptons. And again, like a man about town, like a guy who is clearly like very, or seemingly well liked out in the Hamptons.
Yeah, everybody loves him in the Hamptons.
You get another great quote, which is actually how I thought you were going to open up the episode, which is booze and women. That's my lifestyle, and I love it. Same, buddy.
All right.
Like,
I'm gonna pause right here to just say, like, I think people can probably tell, and I'm sure some people think we're crazy. This movie's legitimately funny.
It's
right?
so funny.
And it's way funnier than it should be, especially 20-some years, almost 30 years later.
And this is what, and I'm going to say there's like another component of this. So we talk about often in this show, yeah, it's that old.
Yeah, I was like,
yeah.
My bad.
Yeah, so we've realized, and listeners, I don't know if you've had this issue, like, I think I just don't understand the 2010s to have happened, because when I do math, I just seem to skip that decade as part of my math.
That's right.
It's very strange. Like, it's kind of like, that's what I love about these films. I get older, they stay the same age. Like, but I'm going to say something that often comes up in the show. So we, with a lot of our episodes, we do a segment called The Hold Up. Like, what is this thing that makes the movie, like, not age well? Or, and with an 80s comedy, that always feels dicey.
Holding your breath a little bit, yeah.
Right? Because you know that there's going to be language or verbiage that, whether it was, most of the time it was already inappropriate in that time, but the threshold of like what people did to be culturally aware and competent is different than now, and how writers' rooms kind of function. This movie, for the most part, I mean, if you take, okay, like the drugs and the mob and the corpse out of it, which we're not like trying to judge anyone for that part of it, but for the most part, this is comedy that has aged decently well. There is, I think, with the suicide note, there is certainly like an element of what's being written that feels regressive. Terms are being
Larry's
used.
Reactions a little,
like,
it's not very progressive. Yeah,
and it's like, okay, Larry, focus on the big picture. But also Larry can't do that. Like, and there's maybe that. But for the most part, this comedy still works, and works really well. Because, like, there's not a moment when I'm not kind of belly laughing. I think we could have made this entire episode, you and I, just Larry quoting back and forth. Like, there's so many funny lines in it.
And before we even got to the Hamptons, we even talk about the date, which I will say the romance between Gwen and Richard is probably the most unnecessary part of this entire film.
We talked about the great outdoors at the beginning, and it's kind of like the romance between the sun and the town.
Yes, right.
What's this for?
Yeah, it just doesn't, It's one of those things, if you took it out, you wouldn't really, it's not that big a deal. But that being said, it does give us some moments. What was Richard's end game on the date and going back to the parents' house?
Well, and I was really thinking about this. I was like, wow, he really doesn't trust that Gwen would understand, which is...
Right.
Which actually I think is pretty accurate. I don't think... Gwen seems a little materialistic, if I'm being honest. But, like, that whole date is, like, so kind of absurd because, like, like, he's lying to her from
Oh
jump.
yeah, it snowballs completely. Which makes me later go, there's no way Gwen forgives Richard that easily so many times.
No! Or a real snapshot of the 1980s dating scene in New
Oh,
York
could be.
City
Yeah, could be.
that you would be like, "You know what? I can accept this baggage."
We
Like,
do get a great director cameo though here.
"Oh, who?
The Richard's dad is played by the director.
Oh, I did not know that. Why did he costume himself that you know what? No judgment." He,
I also have to give, Ted, is it Ted
Kotcheff, I think.
Kotcheff? I mean, he, talking about him a little bit at the moment, he made First Blood.
Yeah, I know.
Like,
Could you have more divergent
right?
films?
Yeah, kind of wild to me.
Well, because when we were doing the research for this, because I was like looking, especially if it's like a director and a writer I don't know, and like I like looking up like the different things. So the writer of the script, Robert Klein, his other kind of notable is European Vacation, which
Oh, okay.
how note
Look, kids, Big Ben Parliament.
So again, it has some great lines. But yeah, there's not like a lot, but it's interesting that you would have a director who does two films that, I mean, could not be more diametrically opposed in terms of like tone and storytelling style and like character development. Like they're so different from each other.
It sounds like he had a really great relationship with Andrew McCarthy. Because Andrew McCarthy actually directed the scene with him in it.
Oh, that's fun.
But it sounds like he was a little bit rough on set. So it sounds like he was a little more First Blood than laid back Hamptons.
Which, I mean, here's the thing. If you recut this as a horror movie, that could be a lot of fun. And maybe that's the space he was in of like, I'm going to make this horror film, but for whatever reason, people are going to laugh at it, and that's strange. But I will say, I do think the setup to the date between Gwen and Richard does have that great line when, like, well, poor Larry's trying to, like, offer out his apartment, and he's like, it's the cockroaches, isn't it? They scatter when you put the lights on. Like, so great. But I mean, so that, like, when you're on the come up and you have, like, a space that's kind of beater, you know what it is, but it's just, like, it's where you're laying your head at night, cockroaches and all, because it's, like, what you can afford, and, like, and I think, again, it gives us that great juxtaposition of, like, their lives in the city are so different than this weekend away. And I imagine the fantasy of this, of, like, here is my very wealthy, well-connected, well-liked and esteemed boss who's inviting us out to the Hamptons for a weekend. It's, like, hot as blazes in the city, and we're going to get to, like, do this thing. And it's, like, such a comedy of errors to get there right away. They have to jump onto the boat.
That wasn't actually leaving.
Yeah. Which, great.
Yeah.
And and the fact that they have absolutely no idea that like Bernie's dead. Like Bernie's been assassinated before, or actually he's not that big of a public figure, so we'll just call him murdered. He's been murdered prior to them arriving.
Bernie gets murdered 30 minutes into this movie with an hour to go.
Which, okay, so that's like a lot of like heavy corpse time.
Yes. Yeah.
Like,
so we got poor Polly, man. Poor Polly, the hitman. Feel so bad for him.
What a great sentence you just said. Poor Polly. That hitman, he's just trying to do a good job.
He was. He said he tried to give Bernie an easy death.
Which he does. It's like a syringe of some kind.
Right.
Yeah.
But poor man just starts to lose his mind because he thinks Bernie just keeps popping back.
You cannot blame him. If you were like really convinced you killed someone and then they were just walking about, wouldn't it freak you out a little bit?
I also want to give a shout out to Bernie's golf cart. Legendary. The Porsche golf cart. Awesome.
Because it's such a bougie move. I can't have just a normal golf cart. No.
You got that great shot of that next to all the other golf carts, and it's just the only one that stands out.
But like, I mean, Bernie's house, like speaking of like kind of like bougie, like his house is a character within itself in this film. It's like such like a, tribute to kind of the architecture and the decadence of like the 80s, particularly like corporate culture of like what this house looks like. And one of the things that I so love about this is like they talk about this like kind of like roving party that like happens like every night. And I just really truly appreciate how vapid the Hamptons crowd is that no one ever realizes he's dead. Like I mean, I'm going to assume it's because they killed all their nasal passages and that's why. But also like how wasted do they all have to be that like they're so wrapped up in their own stories and conversations and how they perceive things, they cannot perceive that there is a literal corpse in the middle of this party who is not responding to anyone, because again, dead, but that none of them realize it.
There's I forget which university right now that taught or teaches a course about Weekend at Bernie's and how it was a satire of the American, people in the 80s and just
But isn't it though?
Yeah.
Because like this is the thing. Like Richard and Larry, who are pretty lovable, we're talking about very positively. We're comparing them to sitcom characters that come later. I mean, they're not good people. They take advantage of this opportunity of their boss being dead to hang out in his house, drink his booze, and cavort with like various women who are showing up there to see Bernie.
I like that. Richard doesn't take much to get convincing from Larry.
No, but again, Larry's that friend who convinces you to do stuff you wouldn't normally do.
We get so many great lines here from Larry when they show up at the house. Now, the house you talked about, beautiful.
Oh.
Like, I was like, oh my God, this place is amazing. That whole thing was built in North Carolina. Like,
oh, seriously?
Yeah, so they had to build it in there in North Carolina at Bald Head Island. And they had to literally tear it down as soon as it was over. That was the agreement that they could make to shoot that summer.
That makes me so sad.
Right?
Wouldn't that be the dopest Airbnb?
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And then you could put like a Bernie skeleton out on
Somebody's
your front
regretting
porch.
that today because, yeah, that would totally be a thing that, people would be doing and taking advantage of. But we get some great Larry lines here, which is what I love when he goes, my dad worked hard. He just had to work harder, And I also, my favorite other Larry is when they discover the cocaine before they quite realize he's dead. And he's like, I watch 2020s. I know the statistics. I read that this is recreational. This is a career. This isn't recreational. It's a career. I'm just like...
Well, and it's funny that like kind of like judgment immediately of Bernie, but it's like you're kind of like looking at this like lifestyle and house, and it's and you can imagine like the temptation of that, right? Of like imagining like this could be me, this could be my like fun getaway house, and like, but at the same time there's like this admiration, but there's somewhat a sense of judgment, and then you realize like how lack of feeling or caring they are towards Bernie, or just like pure like white hot trauma. I don't know which it is, that they're just like, yeah, I mean, yeah, he's dead, but there's a party. We can't really deal with this right now.
Well,
Let's just have
Larry's
fun.
initial reaction is, why do these things always happen to me? I mean, so you are right. I mean, Larry is kind of a psychopath.
But like an adorable
Yes,
psychopath.
exactly.
A redeemable psychopath. Because honestly, he's just, I mean, like, what are you going to do in this situation? And the best part of this all is like what makes it justifiable is we as an audience know that Bernie was plotting to kill them. They don't know that for so long in the film. But I think it's what makes it like palatable as an audience member, because there's that dramatic irony of like, yeah, but we all know that he was planning on killing you, so Bernie's not a good person, so therefore we're kind of okay with what you're doing.
Right.
And it doesn't take much, honestly, for me to be okay with him just propping him up around.
Well, that's the thing. That's why it's so important, just to make sure that we know he's just horrible. He's a horrible human being, so it's okay.
But again, is he? I don't know. I'm in the weeds about it, if I'm being
So this
honest.
is when we get Gwen back in the picture, and we get the lighthouse, which I think I wrote in my notes. It's a miracle we didn't have Weekend at Richards at some point, because
How he doesn't die several times
Right.
in this movie. Really, truly. But the lighthouse being, I think, the scariest of them all. And then just like the great, they're in the sand, and then like Bernie just washes up next to them. I'm like, this is so disgusting. This should be horrifying, but it's so funny.
And then we get to day 2. I mean, well, after we obviously we'll just skip past the whole Tina.
Yes,
scene.
I've said a lot today already.
Yeah.
And I just don't feel like that's something I want to.
Right.
I don't want to pretend the scene didn't happen. I just don't know that I want to deal with it.
It feels, I mean, that's just a bit that somebody went, this is comedy, let's put this in.
Yeah.
But, and I don't feel like, because we had just recently watched Clerks, and I'm like, this is just a bit people used at times.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm okay with its resurgence not happening.
Right.
Again, the necrophilia renaissance, let's not let it happen in the 2020s. We've been through enough.
But we move to day 2, the morning of, and this is where we get full on Larry has just embraced his friendship with Bernie.
When they're playing Monopoly, I could die. It is the funniest thing.
Oh my god, yeah. Bernie, him moving Bernie's hand to wave will never not be funny to me.
And it's everything that happens on that porch. It's the Monopoly, it's him talking to people, it's him waving. It's eventually when he has to he has him in the chair and he's like, oh, you're starting to peel, Bernie. We gotta get you out of the sun. But I think he puts him in the sun, which doesn't make any sense, to when he has to take him off the porch and he rolls him off into the sand.
And then the kid buries him.
All right, let's talk about that kid.
Problem child?
That's putting it mildly. That kid's not right. He sees a person clearly unresponsive and is like, let me just bury him. And then comes into the house with a gun.
You know what? We should talk about that on the hold up. 80s toy guns did not hold up well on their realism. And I'd like to say that was just a bit in the movie, but having been a kid in the 80s and seen some of no,
it's the truth is they were realistic looking, which is terrifying. But then I'm just like, who's letting this kid walk around? Also, I'm still not convinced that it wasn't still somehow a real gun. That kid doesn't look right. I saw no parents around.
That actor went on to be a producer and writer for New Girl.
Aw, who's that kid? A psychopath.
We've named a lot of people psychopaths in this episode.
Apropos to this.
It's true.
But I will say that part does make me laugh, although I think that kid's kind of actually this, and that's the crazy thing. There's a mob hit. There is all of this fraud. There is a corpse being, puppeted around an NSYNC video. But I find the scariest part that kid, because I think that kid would have done some serious damage if we were given more time with him in this film.
Oh, I agree. Completely.
Who goes up to somebody and goes, "Can I bury you, mister?" That's not cool.
I like when he does the kiss my ass and Larry's like, what? Who says that?
I know. And that's the great thing about Larry is when he's still constantly shocked by certain things with everything that has been happening in this brief time that they're in the Hamptons, but he's still somehow surprised by this child.
I'm glad the kid buried him though, because then we get the great vacuuming scene. They're vacuuming his mustache.
You're never getting that sand out of Bernie.
No.
That sand, it's coarse, it gets everywhere. You're not getting that sand out of Bernie.
And you have the just ridiculous, the stapling of the hair back on.
I don't know why. Of all of the things that they do to Bernie's body, that's the one that makes me flinch. That's the one I'm like, that's not right.
My understanding of that was I guess, again, Andrew McCarthy had a lot of, and was allowed to, do a lot of ad-libbing, and that was a bit that he actually came up with.
Well, and this is I will say a credit to Andrew McCarthy and Ted Silverman, both seeing kind of opportunities of how
Jonathan Silverman?
Sorry, Jonathan Silverman. Of how they play off. Where did Ted come from? You know what? Never mind. But also seeing the opportunities to play off of each other in a way that feels like natural friendship and feels like the way of two people who have no idea what to do in this situation would react. They're like, well, just staple his toupee back on, which leads us to the great discovery of the murder plot and how. Again, they have been moving this guy's dead body around.
Before that, I have to just say, I want to say, because this is we watched it for the second time, and I just love when you laugh. You were belly laughing at when Larry got Bernie in the cart, the little red wagon, and going around. The laughter from you, I was just... was the best.
It's just because he's in that little red cart. And he's just all flopped over. Why does he have that little red cart? It doesn't make sense with the rest of the house. If it was a Porsche cart or a glass cart or it does. It makes me laugh. I don't know why. It's so good.
Yeah, I'm glad we got that laugh again.
I weirdly love this movie. It's just so funny.
Success.
But that's...
How could you not love Weekend at Bernie's?
I don't know. I think and then we do get into that murder plot sequence of them discovering this and the audio tape and kind of how Bernie reveals it, like, on the answering machine. But what I love about this is I love that how their reactions play out, like, just the incredulity of, like, "Oh my god, he would do that to us?" It's like, "Oh my gosh, guys, you've been moving his dead body around a house for 2
Right.
days, and you think that this is out of bounds at this point?" Or just, like, how unaware they were of the fact that they were in danger, and then also, like, how phenomenally ruthless they become from here on out. Because they both get a little villainous with each other of like, no, you take Bernie, no, you take Bert. Like, there's such this, like, survival mode that kicks in.
It was, but and see, this is what I think really works is because these two people, they play the odd couple thing, but they never play it so much that you don't understand why they're friends.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
they go at each other, they're very opposite, but I agree with you. And then this is where they start to turn on each other a little bit because everything has been taken to another level. But I love the moment when they try to get Bernie to the boat and they just miss the boat and then they want to go and they kind of like apologize to each other. It's just, yeah.
Yeah, this is because they have to, like, go back and get the keys.
Yeah.
And there's just, so first of all, and I don't know why this is, I did not remember how this movie ended. And we watched it at the beginning of the summer, and then we watched it in the lead up to obviously recording this episode. And for whatever reason, I had blocked out the whole boating
boat scene?
sequence. No idea why, but I completely forgot that happened.
There is a stuntman somewhere who had broken ribs that is very mad at you for forgetting that sequence.
First off, that sequence is so violent, and I love when Andrew McCarthy just turns around and, like, his reaction to realizing that Bernie's not on the boat, it's just, like, so...
Man overboard.
Yeah, it's so ruthless, like...
I always, to this day, again, another line I use is serpentine.
You do say that a lot. But I think that's, like, it's this, like, funny thing that happens where there is somewhat a shift in how they're, like, looking at this whole situation now that they know Bernie was going to try and kill them and that their lives are in danger.
Yeah. It's another good moment of showing how everybody in the Hamptons at that time were just vapid and crazy because they're all sitting there cheering on Bernie as they think he's just body surfing the water.
Well, it's the fact of like where is the Coast Guard?
Right.
Like that this is occurring and that no one is trying to mitigate this. And the fact that the only thing people seem really bothered by is if their like champagne gets knocked over, which
well, the rich guy was like, that's illegal. What you're doing there, it's illegal.
That's illegal. And it's like, and we all know that guy. That guy who like sees wrongdoing and is like, well, that's illegal. But does nothing to like help the situation. So it's just like it's a really hilarious sequence. And again, like, and you know, this being taught as a commentary on like 80s culture and consumerism and greed, like that all to me tracks because like it does really position everyone who's out in the Hamptons is so wrapped up in their own nonsense that they cannot see very clear things that are in front, that no one is seen calling the police or really seeming shocked by the fact that this person is being dragged behind this boat, that they're all just like...
I'm really proud that we're like really trying to elevate the substance and the actual undertone and story of Weekend at Bernie's.
Weekend at Bernie's is a masterpiece. How dare you? How could you not say that this is a masterpiece? But then, you know, you get to like kind of like the wrap up of this like at the house, you know, so they have to swim back. And I love that it's like Richard like retelling the story of the past 2 days as they're swimming
right.
with Bernie like towards the beach and kind of like how it all like unravels from there. We get Polly back. I know I've been missing Polly at this point.
Oh, you got to, yeah. We also get Gwen back at this point, which again, forgot she's been out of the film for a little while.
Still trying to understand what Gwen's purpose is.
Yeah, just to be there.
Yeah, it's fine. Wants to thank Bernie.
But yeah,
for
we get good
internship.
Polly back. Polly coming in, just guns blazing.
Well, and you have that great like, you know, say like runs out and then he's like trying to put more like bullets in, and then like, you know, them just like running around the house.
But I have to, before that, again, another one of my favorite Larry lines. I'm blind. They're all just standing in front of him after he shoots. Richard's like, I didn't see anything.
Yeah, I'm blind. And I'm like, I really appreciate that they both are so naive that they think there's a way out of this situation still.
But that's McCarthy he goes all in this, man, and he just sells every line.
Yeah.
So good.
And finally, 2 days later, after calling the police and saying help, or not 2 days. I think it's like it's later that day of saying how the police finally arrived.
Right.
And I love that, like, you can so tell that, like, Larry is very proud of what he did and wants, like, photos taken. And I'm like, do you not think at some point that they're going to do an autopsy and realize that this guy has been dead for a lot longer than just getting shot now? That this is not the thing he died from? Or were people so casual in the 80s that there wouldn't have been an autopsy? I need answers.
A couple of things I was saying. I love the decision to use Night at Hawk Mountain to finish out this film.
All right. Okay, can we talk about this for a second?
Yeah.
Because, like, what type of crazy do you have to be for your beachy tunes to be Night on Hawk Mountain? And that you've got that thing queued up of, like, a lady's coming over. It's the Hamptons. It's the summer. I'm vibing. I'm grooving. Night on Hawk Mountain. Hey, do you think
It kind of, you know.
Does Bernie call himself the Chernabog? Like, I need to know these answers.
We don't want the answer to
You're
the
right.
question that you're teetering on.
The mustache is the Chernabog.
But no, I'm totally with you. I mean, first off, again, no way Gwen's with Richard by the end of this.
No.
Although we have to just question Gwen. But we're going to talk about the sequel briefly here in a second, but my sequel to me is the investigation of the next 48 hours after this.
Well, I'm thinking like Ryan Johnson directed like a Knives Out situation.
Yes.
Like, you know, because they're doing that sequel to Knives Out, and I'm thinking like you get Daniel Craig in there and he's like investigating this with like a really terrible Southern accent. Like, I want to see that movie. Like,
I'm totally with
up.
you. Like, yeah, how Larry and Richard just walk away scot-free on this is completely...
All right, and full disclosure, I know nothing of the sequel. And I asked you not to tell me anything about the sequel until we recorded, so you could get my genuine reaction. Ryan, can you explain to me what the sequel to Weekend at Bernie's is about?
I loved when you just looked at me and went, so wait, there's a sequel to this? And you were like, wait, is Bernie in it? I was like, yes. And you were like, how? So let me read the description for you.
I'd love to hear it.
In a continuation of the story in Weekend at Bernie's, Larry and Richard are wrongly accused of Bernie's fraud and are promptly sacked. To clear their names and to get some compensation, the two set off to track down Bernie's hidden loot. Larry and Richard use voodoo revived corpse to track down hidden money to clear their names.
Is he like up and talking?
He doesn't talk, he dances. He dances a lot. And let me tell you, Weekend at Bernie's 2 is awful. Everything I'm saying is awful. It is just not a good movie. However, I'm going to say two things about it that it will always be remembered. One, my mom thought Bernie's little dance walk was the funniest thing in the world. Me talking about you with the cart, I will say equally, my mom's just love and laughter about, and she would do the... hysterical. No, she said the movie was terrible, but she just thought that was... So that alone to me, I am so thankful that movie existed.
Love that.
Like 10 years ago, it became a thing again. It was like, it got revived by some rapper who was doing it, and then it became like...
Wait, the Weekend at Bernie's Dance?
The Weekend at Bernie's Dance. So... it's still, that's the only thing to take away from it. But no, I mean, the fact that, you know, Bernie's still like somehow able to be, you know, and then there's a whole voodoo aspect of it and he can walk around on his own. It's a little...
Okay, so here are some things. One, we have to watch this because I need to see this dance. Two,
we're going to need a lot of cocktail of the podcast before we watch it.
Yep, Corpse Reviver number 2 is the cocktail of the pod this week. It'll feel very fitting during this. The other thing is I have to think just like self-tanner and cocaine cut with formaldehyde has amazing powers in terms of preserving a body. That's the only thing that can possibly make sense to me as to why you can justify that his corpse would still be intact. Like, is he at all decayed? Why is this the thing I'm pumped up on?
I can't say I remember that much.
It's voodoo. All right, so with this is something we haven't done in a while, but we thought would work well for this would be to think about some recasting for this film. If this would to be remade, although I don't see it ever being remade, nor should it be. but essentially what that might look like in the hands of like who would play Richard and Larry and Bernie and the like if this was redone in like a modern way. How do you see this recasting?
Well, first, I'd like to say that I believe there was a sequel made, a remake to this back in 2011 when there was a story of two Denver men that went to their buddy's house to find him deceased and decided that they were going to take him out for one night out into town on his dime.
Wait, what is this?
This is a true story, actually.
That's a true story.
It's a literally, you can look it up. Two guys that took out their buddy around town after they found out he was deceased.
No.
And then eventually took him back, dropped him off at his house, then still took his credit card out to the strip club. Once the cops finally caught up, they tried to act like they didn't know he was deceased, but they pled guilty. They got 2 years probation.
Okay, given that you told me you want me to like dress you up when you're recorded, so I don't think you should be saying this with any judgment, but I will judge them for the both of us.
But no, I'm so glad we get to bring this segment back because I do think there are some options here.
I know what these are. I can feel it. It's happening again. Wait, is it not it?
What's that? No, that would be the perfect casting.
It would be the
Tell me the perfect casting is not Bill Hader and Ben Schwartz.
I don't want it to be remade, but that would be so good.
But all right, that's fair. All right, but I have two casting because I actually had one.
Okay.
And then you said something, and I went, "Oh, that actually would work." So here's my one. Selena Gomez in the Richard character,
Amazing.
Richard type character, and Emma Stone as the Larry type character.
Oh my god, I love that.
With Tom Holland essentially flipping out for the Gwen character.
Okay, great.
And then I have Bernie as I have either George Clooney or Robert Downey Jr.
Oh, Hollywood. You're not listening, but if you were, please make this happen. Like, I'm thinking like an Only Murders in the Building kind of vibe to it.
Yeah.
Like that sense of humor. Mm-hmm. So it's a little bit different, a little bit more modern, maybe even a hair cheekier.
Yeah.
I love that casting.
It works. I do, though. You said some casting that I went, and you're going to be shocked when I tell you this. And I went, oh, that would actually work, too.
What?
John Mulaney and Pete Davidson
That'd be
redoing
great.
this.
And you hate both of them. Oh, no. Everybody knows you complain about them all the time.
But they would work. You know what? Pete Davidson won me over in Bodies, Bodies, Bodies. He was very, very good in that.
He's great in Bodies, Bodies, Bodies.
Yeah.
All right. I don't even want to say my casting.
I want to hear it.
Okay, so I had mine. So in the Richard role, I have Donald Glover. In the Larry role, I have Daniel Pudi because I really want to see a Troy and Abed reunion. And
Can we just do a Troy and Abed movie?
Right? And I have Bernie as Taika Waititi.
Oh my god, that is genius! I love it. You know what? Folks, we can have Bernie's can be remade. And you know what? You said it shouldn't be remade. No, this is a movie that absolutely can be remade.
Either of our casting, I want to see these movies with. Can someone just do some sort of special where they these casts each play a different segment of the movie just to see what they would all look like in these roles? It'd be so great. You know, as we had talked about, the planning out of this, and we tried, not to talk too much about the film, but we were talking about, the structure and things we wanted to talk about. One of the things I was, really convinced that we were going to need to talk about is this really a how could you? There are so many movies that have joined the rankings and annals of, us trying to fill our gaps in film knowledge. And I was like, is this really actually a how could you? And as we talked about this, 100%, no discussion or debate. This is a how could you. This is a great movie. It is funny. It is held up well. It definitely has legs for reinterpretations of it. So I'm so glad we got to fill this gap.
Visually, it's a great film too. Every aspect of it. Yeah, it's ridiculous. It's dumb. It shouldn't work, but it's funny. And like you said, it holds up. It's just check it out, people. Sometimes it's just fun to just sit down, turn your mind off, and watch something just absurdly funny.
Yeah, I know, and I agree. And I think this has some legs. I think it's got some interesting stuff happening in it, but I think that the bottom line is it's just fun, and it's a ridiculous concept for it to be this fun and for it to work this well. So so glad we watched this. Hopefully you are closing out your Labor Day weekend, not with a corpse that you have to puppeteer, but maybe just like watching this great movie, and maybe checking out the sequel, because I know I'm going to want to. If you're not currently following us on social media, please follow us at How Could You Podcast on Instagram, at How Could You Pod on Twitter. If you go to facebook.com/How Could You Podcast, you can see all of the same posts that we're doing on the other social media sites. You can email us at any time at howcouldyoupodcast@gmail.com. If you look in the liner notes for this episode, we will be uploading all of our episodes to YouTube. So if that's your platform of choice and you would rather listen to us there, hit that like and subscribe and notification bells. Do all the things for us.
And until next time, enjoy the Odyssey.